to the Squall Line Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Fiske, and I'm glad you're here. On this podcast, we'll talk about weather through the eyes of an Air Force veteran, share stories of warriors I've known and those I've had the privilege to lay to rest, and explore the works of God's grace in my life and in the lives of others over the past 50 years. Whether you're fascinated by storms, inspired by service, or encouraged by stories of faith and redemption, there's something here for you. So settle in. Let's get started. Welcome to the Squall Line Podcast. This episode is about my perspective and journey during Operation Desert Storm as an Air Force weatherman, stationed with the 11th Aviation Army Brigade. The U.S. Army does not have weather support, and many Air Force weather jobs are with Army units. I've had about 9.5 years of weather support with Army units. Desert Storm would be my first time in combat. Now I'm a veteran of foreign wars, just like my grandfather in World War I, my father, who flew B-17s in World War II, and I'm now the third-generation Fiske in uniform. This is the first Air Force weather station to be built in support of the Army's 11th Aviation Brigade, located at Illesheim Army Airfield. We had no Air Force weather personnel present at Illesheim. Weather support came from the 7th Weather Squadron in Heidelberg, 161 miles away. Before the 11th Aviation Unit arrived, Illesheim was home to the 1st Battalion, 6th Infantry Unit. They had some attack helicopters like the Cobra and Hueys used during the airfield from Vietnam in the Cold War. The airfield was built in 1936 as a supply and repair unit for the Luftwaffe. Occasionally, Me-109Ds, Junker Ju-88 bombers, and Me-410 night fighter squadrons used the base against Allied forces throughout World War II. The 11th Aviation Brigade moved up from Swabish Hall and formed 3 attack squadrons of Apaches in 1989. Our unit was part of that massive 7th Corps sweep in Operation Desert Storm from west to east, February 24th through February 28th of 1991. Going to war in 1990 and 1991 was the first large-scale conventional war since Vietnam. America had had some skirmishes along the way. We had the Mayaguez incident in 1975, a container ship, 41 lives lost. October 1983 was Operation Urgent Fury, the invasion of Grenada, 19 lives lost. Operation Just Cause, December of 1989, the invasion of Panama, 23 lives lost. And now Operation Desert Storm, 147 deaths from battle and 151 non-battle deaths. Most of the non-battle deaths were from moving 695,000 troops into the theater of operations. We lost 62 from vehicles and 47 from aircraft crashes. We had moved 425,000 troops to Saudi Arabia by January 16, 1991. Non-U.S. allies were also in the theater, now 259,000 strong. War after Vietnam was going to be totally different than what we had done before. We are not going into a forever war again. Not to repeat the agony of Vietnam, Operation Desert Storm was decided to be swift, decisive, focused in and out, and with overwhelming force. Total control of the media was another thing. We're not allowing them critical information until after mission execution. Support of our troops with a coalition of nations, not just America by itself. We wanted also no Jane Fondas in the media. You have to remember, September 11th is about a decade later in 2001. And by 2003, we had lost our focus and purpose once again by coming into Iraq to finish off what we didn't complete in Desert Storm. We left too much of the regime intact and had to go to war with them again. We kept troops in Iraq, supporting no-fly zones for over 12 years. We reinvaded in 2003 through 2011. Operation Iraqi Freedom, 8.5 years of policing, fighting ISIS, costing us 4,500 more lives. We stated it was to disarm Iraq of WMDs, to end the regime of Saddam Hussein, to eliminate the state of ISIS and all support. And where has that got us now? Iran just used Iraq to launch missile attacks into Saudi Arabia on August 2026. We then had another operation, Operation Inherent Resolve. Again, ISIS from August 2014 to April of 2026. 120 lives lost over 11 years and 8 months in theater. What are the similarities of this with our current war in Iran? Are we repeating the very same thing? Is this another forever war? I think we'll have to have another part on that and look at the history. Getting a little sidetracked, let's go back to Illesheim, Germany. This is the first time our volunteer enlistment force will see war since the stop of the draft in 1973. How are we going to hold up? Will we crumble under pressure or stand up and fight? I'm a master sergeant now in E7, 36 years old, 17 years in the Air Force. I'm considered the old man at this age, with experience that the younger troops are looking up to for leadership. My mind doesn't feel old, but my body does. The Air Force doesn't train for Army war tactics. We don't play with grenades, or how to dig foxholes, or how to establish lines of fire with 50 caliber machine guns. We've never even seen a 50 caliber machine gun, or how to use hand and arm signals when you're supposed to be quiet. Jeez. We are much more geeks with technical jobs than soldiers. You give us a hand signal from a trench, we're probably just going to look at you a little strange, cock our head way back and say hi, and probably get shot at. We've got some serious learning curves to overcome before going to war with the Army. Thank the Lord, the first sergeant of 11th Aviation knew we were trouble and wanted to work with us anyway. The Air Force during basic training made us shoot an M16, and we knew which end was business. But we haven't fired an M16 since basic training. The Army had quarterly training, how to be a better warder, what to do, things that they had learned. No such training in the Air Force. Fortunately, that has now been rectified with Air Force and Army weather units because of Desert Storm. So getting up to speed was crucial for our small weather unit. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got to deploy first. Starting in July of 1990, Saddam Hussein started massing his troops on the border of Kuwait. By mid-July, we were all on alert in Europe. Everybody's packing, getting ready to deploy to Saudi Arabia and support our aviation unit. Here's where we run into a few cowboy commanders from the Apache squadrons who were ready to jump in their helicopters and fly directly to Saudi Arabia to try out their new Hellfire systems. Of course, there's no way to do that. It's not an air refueler. It doesn't have the legs to do that. Nobody was going to plot that course. But we did manage to have Apaches get transported to Desert Storm by C-5 Galaxies, which can hold 6 Apaches at a time. We had Air Force leaders telling the Army, you don't need our weather units. They're going to be no good out there in the desert. Sure enough, the Air Force had never supplied us with solid tactical equipment that would work or deploy with Army units and how to train to survive. You're in a base weather station. You got a restroom. You got all the nice toys right there. You go mobile, what do you have? Headquarters Europe came up and said, nonsense, we train and fight as one. So much for the Air Force telling the Army what to do. A lot of scrambling is now taking place. Tactical satellite receivers for German weather machines were called Rossi, named after the company that made them. We had very small printers, and most of our data we couldn't zoom in on, so we did the best we could. We were now tapping into Meteosat 4. Meteosat 4 was a global black and white GOS satellite picture from Germany. It was very grainy, pixelated, low resolution, but at least it was current and the best tool that we were going to get in Desert Storm. We needed something that was as much as real time as possible. Satellite data took about 30 to 50 minutes to write a single picture, and then that picture had to be processed for another 5 to 10 minutes before you could actually see the picture. So that was going to be current data. So our most current weather data was going to be looking out the window, looking from all directions, and then an hour-old satellite picture to basically put your forecast out with. You got to remember, at this time in 1991, 1990, GPS was just getting its start. We didn't have many GPS receivers. We didn't have things targeting things on the ground and giving us location. We literally had troops drive right out of port right into Iraqi camps because they were lost in the desert and their signals gave them a false location and they were delayed. Not an ideal way to navigate a massive desert with no landmarks. Same for satellite. This was a first-generation German satellite. Weather is just getting used to using satellite data. The nighttime resolution was only about 3 miles. Good enough for weather data, awful hard to see on a small screen. We had to literally plug in a video machine or a computer screen into their display to get a 9-inch display to actually see. We needed to learn about weather in Iraq. Who knew anything about it? Iraq didn't take weather observations. Iraq didn't put out weather reports or weather information like the National Weather Service. There's no people that live in the middle of the desert. It's nomads. They have camels, for sake. They're just right out in the middle with a tent and a fire and eating a sheep. Nobody lived in the middle of the desert. There's no history. Nothing to pull from. Hey, Mr. Nomad on a camel, what's the weather been like for the last 50 years? We had little data, and now we had people scrambling all over Europe trying to get us data. Historical climatological data, but this was all going to be macro data, big picture. Not what we needed to know for combat with Apache helicopters. Of course, it's a desert, so it should be just dry, great flying, and never have any weather, or so people thought. Everybody needed equipment. We needed computers for our truck. Then we needed air conditioners to keep it running. Then we needed filters from the sandstorms and the like. Who's ever fought in a desert environment? How do you keep these things running and operational? Turns out Colonel Hitt had an opportunity and was invited by Israel to go out a couple of months before with the 4th and 229th to Israel. It's the first time any of the Apache helicopter pilots were actually able to live fire a Hellfire missile because there was no location in Europe to practice at. So praise God, the 4th and 229th was now the most experienced desert flying, Hellfire flying unit that was in Saudi Arabia. Turns out also, when you're in Israel, it's a pretty much of a desert in places. Helicopters have a big problem. Sand is very corrosive and tears up your engines. Sand also eats rotor blades. Have you ever heard of sandblasting? Well, they had to coat the blades with a special 3M tape to stop the Cope-Etchells effect. By the way, this was named after 2 soldiers that had died in Afghanistan, an Army Ranger, Ben Kopp, and Joe Etchells, a British soldier. Basically, the blades are turning so fast and hitting the sand, they're just like a diamond grinder on steel. Lots of sparks. So many sparks, the blades present a halo effect and light up at night. Beautiful. You should see it. So can the enemy. Voila. You now have an easy target where you can launch a mortar round to. You should see the pictures. It's a very big problem. Plus, the 3M tape didn't always stay glued on all the time. An Apache or Chinook could come in for a landing and the tape would start shredding off. You'd hear this weird swishing sound as the helicopter's winding down in the air. Then things around the helicopter and on the ground are getting bumped, and you'd see the tape get wrapped around the fuselage. It's quite a mess. Thankfully, there are no reports of injuries or deaths from 3M tape shredding a crew chief. On August 2nd, Saddam went into Kuwait, an overwhelming force of over 100,000 troops. By nightfall, they had taken Kuwait City, the Emir's palace, the airport, and within the next 24 hours, the whole country. Basically, the state of New Jersey would have been taken over in 30 hours. Executions of Kuwaiti civilians started taking place, 10 for every 1 Iraqi soldier that was killed. Torture camps, at least 2 dozen popped up. Massive random arrest of 6,000 to 7,000 people. Widespread looting and, of course, sexual violence and abuse. Saddam owned Kuwait in 48 hours and started taking their oil. He claimed that Kuwait was side drilling their Iraqi oil wells. This was never proven. There was never anything to this claim. But Saddam had just captured, in 48 hours, 20% of the world's oil reserves. He wanted the resources to help recover from all his deficits from an 8-year battle with Iran. By August 12th, El-Assaim was locked down. Game on. Prepare to deploy to defend Kuwait and kick Iraq out of their country. Let's go stop the bully. This time, from August until we deployed on December 12th, was very hectic, challenging, chaotic, and can you say stressful. You name it, this was not easy on families. This is called op-tempo or operations tempo, the high-speed, chaotic pace of military life during preparation for war. You go to work, you don't know if you're coming home, you don't know if you're going to come back, you pack everything like you're leaving, and then all of a sudden they cancel, and you come back home at 10 p.m. You do the same thing tomorrow. You do that for 4 months, and your family just wants you to leave and quit pulling out their heartstrings every single day. Plus, you're ready to leave and deploy just to go get it done. That's a special podcast we need to add to this from my wife's perspective. She needs to tell the story from her perspective of what it's like to deploy your husband into a military war zone. She'll have all the emotions and all the things she must have felt in that terrible, chaotic time. She had to watch me leave a few times for months at a time. That'll be a great podcast to add on. One thing we started to notice during this time is, whatever we asked for, we got. Funds were released. You need something, you got it. We needed an AC unit, we got it. We needed a weather tool, we got it. No more waiting around thinking you might get lucky with whatever you had to ask for, hoping to prepare for war that maybe it might come. 11th Aviation Brigade had a motto, "We make the difference." Boy, they sure did. We started getting everything we needed. They made it happen. We started massively downloading information, total immersion into Middle Eastern cultures. How not to insult your fellow Arab that's from Egypt. Did you know if you cross your legs and at the bottom of your shoe happens to be exposed to an Arab next to you, that's an offense? An offense that he can get up and be mad enough to want to kill you? Wow. Remember, it's a coalition force, and many Americans are just not familiar with worldwide cultures and experiences, including us. Even though we live in Germany, that's just one aspect of it. Getting all the climatology data from all Middle East countries was a challenge. Learning how weather patterns from satellite imagery may affect their regions. What's normal for their weather systems and how do they normally approach? They are surrounded by large bodies of water. Mediterranean, Black, Red, and Caspian seas, plus the Persian Gulf. What effects do these play on local climate? It's a lot to learn in a very short period of time. A normal forecaster takes about 1.5 years to get good with weather patterns when they're stationed someplace new. All the forecasters are digging into thousands of pages of data to get smart for that area of the world. Of course, there's very little data. It's mostly uninhabited deserts. Very little technology, almost no observations from the ground. It wasn't electronically stored. It's all on paper. We had to take it with us. We had to learn along the way. Sure wish we had some nomads we could call on to call out some weather observations for us. As we got closer and closer to deployment, other things we had to do were approaching. How to prepare our bodies for the Middle East. I had deployed for 6 months to Honduras, so I had an idea of what we might be facing. A lot of our younger airmen had no idea what was coming. Plus, most of the troops had not gone anywhere where there was a possibility of biological weapons, weapons of mass destruction, etc. That's new for everybody. We had the whole base show up at the movie theater. So did the hospital. Can you say shots? People lined up all over, pulling down their pants, getting every shot to make you survive where you're headed. The standard round for shots was typhoid, cholera, hepatitis B, meningitis, yellow fever, polio, tetanus, and diphtheria. Then the mother of all shots, gamma-globulin shot. It's pooled human plasma with antibodies. It's got an immediate short-term protection against hepatitis A and helps you with communal living in crowded areas like ports and tents. That one you need to shoot in your butt cheek. and it takes a while to give you that shot. It's quite a burn, and it lasts for 2 days before it wears off. While deployed to a combat zone, you get one of those every 3 months. Supposed to keep you healthier. Unfortunately, we had one of our airmen pass out cold when he saw all those needles coming at him. It was sort of like an Edward Scissorhand. Here you are. They just dragged him out of the way as he hit the floor, pulled down his pants, and shot away. No time to say no, or change your mind, or back out. You pass out, they drag you to the side, you're still getting your shots. On a side note, we did have these flies in Operation Desert Storm that literally landed on you and sucked the blood right out of your skin, right through your skin. Looked like a housefly, but it wasn't. For 14 months after we're back from Desert Storm, they told us, please don't donate any blood, just in case you're full of parasites. Nice of them to tell that before. Nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live here too long in the desert. Finally, the op tempo was relaxing as we had our shots and we had everything we needed to deploy and we were all packed up. Word was given and off we went December 12th, 1,500 hours headed to Nuremberg Airport. Civilian buses arrived by the dozens and we loaded up. My son and daughter really wanted to go to base to say goodbye. Besides, my son wanted to see all our M16s. However, wisdom was you didn't want your kids around when all the wives were trying to say goodbye and create an out-of-the-control tearjerker with kids wailing for their dads or moms and moms wailing for their husbands. It could have been a mess. So kids stayed home. Cherie gave me a big hug and a kiss, and off I went. I had promised to our son that I would wave at our house and say goodbye when the bus went by. Of course I did, but it wasn't at the time my son was at the window. Of course, our son had thought that the bus would sort of make a stop in front of our house so he could wave goodbye. Ryan was in kindergarten and Kelly was in preschool. When Cherie got home, Ryan was asking, "Where's Daddy?" Daddy said he would wave goodbye. Ryan asked, "Is it 3:30 yet?" He said he waved goodbye at 3:30. Cherie had to tell him the buses have already gone and Daddy had left. Ryan insisted that Daddy promised and he wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Ryan was crying, Kelly started crying, and day one was hitting home to Cherie. Cherie paused, asked God, "Is this how hard it's going to be with Rick gone to war? My kids crying for their daddy every day?" Right at the end of her prayer, Ryan ran over to the window and happened to see a big German bus. It had just stopped at the corner before turning. Buses never stop at that corner. They just roll through. Ryan just waved and said, "Goodbye, Daddy, goodbye." And then the bus pulled out, and Ryan, all confident, turned around, put his hands on his hips and said, "See, Mommy, Daddy promised he'd say goodbye." And God immediately reassured Cherie with a very big yes. This is how it's going to be with Rick gone. Promises kept. I'm here with you. Here's a bus for your 6-year-old son and somebody waving. I've got you. Ryan thought he had seen me. His heart was full. Cherie was reassured by God. I've got you covered. The faithfulness of God is so amazing. So off to war we go. No yellow brick road here. We arrived at Daharan August 13th, 1100 hours, through Rome. We then headed to Al-Jubal port, waiting for our equipment to arrive. Now, this was a hectic staging area waiting for ships and aircraft to arrive with our weapons of war. All of a sudden, a hangar in Saudi Arabia that's normally empty has 1,200 to 1,400 troops that need to live on the floor. They need a place to sleep. They need to go to the bathroom. They need to eat. This was a logistics nightmare. We only had 4 outhouses for 1,400 troops. It's not going to work. Water, basic sanitation, latrines, etc. did not exist. Our commander, Colonel Hitt, was furious. This is no way to have his troops treated. He could provide better sanitation in field conditions than they could in port. We had to endure that port for 10 days. You'd have to push the fecal matter down in the porta potty just to go to the bathroom. A really nasty situation. There used to be tons of pictures from GIs on the web showing the port, but the DoD restricted the media from showing the disgusting pictures of how our U.S. troops were being taken care of on their first deployment into a war zone. I still have one of my pictures showing the conditions in port. At least the military controlled the narrative, and that helped us more than anything. The DoD decided what the world needed to know, and not the media spinning their own narratives. This was not a great way to start Operation Desert Storm for the troops. It just makes me cringe thinking about port. I was requested by the brigade commander to be one of the first people on a chopper out to our new location. Wow, I've never seen so much sand. He wanted me to estimate prevailing winds for chow halls and where to set up the outhouses. So hopefully our waste smells will be downwind as much as possible from our food. Smart way to use weather. It worked for us most of the time. Our first staging area was Iraqi Pumping Station 3. The area was discovered by our brigade commander, Colonel Hitt. He was surveying to find a place for his aviation brigade and ran across this location that had a runway big enough for a C-130 in the middle of a desert. He landed and went right into these buildings asking if this is available. He was met by a British fellow that said, "What took you so long, mate?" Like, "Where have you been?" Handed him keys and said, "It's all yours." Colonel Hitt checked it out. They had billets, mess hall, showers. He was absolutely amazed, sitting out in the desert and empty. 5 miles south of Asadawi. This was an Aramco pumping station operated in Saudi Arabia by Saudis. No Iraqis, but still very cautious, with Arabs running around in a location where the American military is now moving in to take over. Colonel Hitt called General Franks and told him what he had found, and Colonel Franks blessed it and said, "The rest is history. Here we go." Now we had a C-130 delivering our supplies in as fast as we could get them from port. All the gear now really piling in. We could get the kinks out a lot quicker, get the helicopters filtered, get our tents up, fire up our generators, get the helicopter blades taped, get our 30mm loaded and the Hellfire missiles to be ready for war. Just a few Arab workers were still clearing out from our location. Unfortunately, we had American GIs with 45s pulling them out locked and loaded many times, scaring the Saudis, scaring the Americans, and everybody being a little twitchy, as you could imagine being on a front line near Iraq. We were a bit jumpy, but so were the Saudis, and so was everybody else. Combat engineers came in, and the armored bulldozers building 8-foot sand berms for us to protect our line of sight and give us protection from potentially inbound Scud missiles if they have to hit. It also gave us lines of fire, positions between our units and the border, keeping us on our toes for any possible infiltration from the north. Colonel Hitt even started a shower rotation for all the units. Every 3 days we had running water. What a blessing. Thank you, Colonel Hitt. We had electrical problems in our truck every time we hooked up to our generator. We had an electrical shock go through the truck, about 110 volt. It'd make life miserable. The problem was, hooking up your equipment, it blew all our fuses. Now we've run out of our spare fuses, and we had to go to the first shirt to say what is going on. He walked right into our truck like he had owned it, pulled out all the overhead lights in the cab and said, "This has been a problem with this model." Then he exposed a ground wire that had a problem where they put the lights in. He had it out, had it electrically taped up, stuffed back in the hole, told us to try it again. Now you could grab the truck and you didn't get electrocuted. But here's the problem. We're out of fuses. He saved our bacon for setting up the truck, but now we had to find a way to get our equipment to run. So we had to get pretty creative. We found some copper wires and we untied the multiple strands of copper wires to get to one single wire. We then unsoldered a fuse and then took that one copper wire and placed it in between that fuse and then soldered the fuse back together so it had one copper wire in the middle to make contact. We had no idea if this would work. Plug it in, and praise the Lord, we now had satellite data and equipment once again. We immediately put in a request for more fuses from headquarters, but we knew that was going to take a while, but our makeshift idea was working, thank you, Lord. That is what is amazing about Americans. We find ways to get around our obstacles. We make things happen when others just quit. We have a can-do attitude to look and see what we can do to make something work. That's why we're successful. That's why we're successful in wars, in harsh conditions, in complex issues. We make lemonade out of sewage water. Thank the Lord for people like our first sergeant. Don't try, just do, to borrow Yoda. Just as the 11th Aviation Brigade's motto is, we make the difference. Yes, you did. Thank you, First Shirt. We had thunderstorms start kicking in January 2nd and January 9th. And then on January 12th and 13th, it poured. We got 2.61 inches of rain that flooded out everything, our tents, the Tactical Operations Command, everything. 2.6 inches of water in a desert doesn't do anything but make rivers. We're digging moats with our hands, trying to save our clothes. I watched my whole bag of uniforms and everything float away down a ditch. Not pretty. Visibilities were less than 500 meters. Ceilings of clouds were under 100 feet. Helicopters couldn't launch. We had fogs in the morning. We had blowing sand. You name it, we experienced it all. Not exactly what we thought weather would be like in a desert. We made many weather mistakes. Praise the Lord, most of the mistakes came while we weren't at war, but we did the best we could with what we had. War kicked off now for us, morning of January 17th, around 1 a.m. First Sergeant came running around and said, "Get into your trenches, lock and load, get your flak vest on, if you have one. We're going silent shortly." I literally couldn't swallow. I'd only had about 30 minutes in bed, and when he said lock and load, I just went, whoa, I'm going to war. Now it's showtime. Getting everything set. We grabbed what maps of paper we could to help our forecast, slammed around in our M16s to make sure we've got our standard issue of 210 rounds. We're putting on our mop suits, which a mop suit is what protects you from gas attack. We only had one. We've got that sucker on. We've got our gas mask with us, and now we're running outside, sitting in water-filled ditches that are concrete reinforced, and it's cold. We're listening. All the generators going off. It's getting awful quiet. Around us are about 200 folks from the brigade, from headquarters in the TOC, but it's pretty eerily quiet. We're just sitting and listening. Don't really hear anything going on now. This is like 2 a.m. in the morning. Then I saw something that brought the presence of God to my heart. We're all pretty nervous. Nobody's been to war except the senior Army personnel and commanders that were in Vietnam. And we're all watching each other, encouraging each other with our eyes, but we're just listening. At a distance about 20-25 yards, I saw a lighter come on and someone trying to light a cigarette. What was wild was the cigarette in his mouth was quivering so much, so up and down, it was like a moth trying to fly around flame, and the flame was shaking so much it couldn't catch the moth. The two were never going to meet. No way. The flame was avoiding the tip of his cigarette at all cost. And with his hands shaking so bad, we felt so bad for the poor guy. Then out of the darkness, a pair of hands wrap around his, and the lighter goes very steady. As soon as the lighter went steady, the cigarette quit quivering in his lips. Then all of a sudden, the flame met the tip of the cigarette and a slight glow, and we're done and the light is out. And my heart felt the Spirit say, "I'm here, Rick. Just like you saw me wrap the hands around that soldier's hands, I've got you guys surrounded. It's going to be okay." Just like that brought comfort to my heart and my spirit, I felt God's peace. I stopped and thanked the Lord for showing me that, and then I shared that story with others to give them peace, letting them know our Lord is here with us. We didn't know, but I'm sure our commander did know how things were supposed to kick off. The opening attack was from a company of Apaches from the 101st Airborne, way on the eastern front. They were supposed to go in and knock out radar sites along the southern border. 8 Apaches at 236 and 4 paved low special helicopter ops taking out early warning sites with Hellfire missiles. This opened up a 20-mile wide corridor so the initial waves of attack could happen. By 2:38, 100 Tomahawk missiles were launched from all the ships in the neighboring area, heading for power grids, communications, front lines, radars, all the way into Baghdad. At 2:51, F-117 stealth fighters had bombs dropping in and around Baghdad. Saddam, true to his word, launched Scuds towards Israel and Dhahran by 4 a.m. Now we're in our gas mask for the next 6 hours, laying in our trenches. We're still listening, and we can hear the high altitude of aircraft moving forward, going into Iraq, and Saddam made his big statement, "The mother of all wars has started." It took a while for things to calm down, to get out of our trenches and fire up the generators once again. Just before we were getting ready to leave our trenches around 8 a.m. as daylight, we heard a gunshot. We're sitting there hunkered down, and bang! We knew it was a gunshot. We were required to stay still, and all of a sudden we saw something I'd never seen before. 2 E-7 infantrymen assigned to the brigade, who were extremely talented and fit, ran and jumped over 3 stands of concertina razor wire, tucked and rolled and hit on the other side of the ground, and then moved forward like lightning towards the gunshot. They looked like superheroes to me. Perfect landings, no hiccups, landed with their rifles across their waists. It was amazing. Turns out a pilot had accidentally fired off his .38 pistol in the staging area. It's a false alarm, but rather exciting for us. Now we're getting out of our trenches, getting out of our gas mask, trying to get our generators up and getting ready for weather for the day. War has started. We need to be everything up, tip-top, and in shipshape. Something happened to make the brigade commander get a little worried about where we were located in Iraqi Pumping Station 3. So he made a command order that we all had to pack up and go deeper away into towards the buildings and around and behind buildings to hide our trucks and to make us a less obvious target just in case. So now you're having to pack up, take all your antennas down, and get that to move while you've only had 30 minutes of sleep. We finally got our truck up and running, got everything squared away by 2 a.m. that morning on the 18th, 24 hours later after kickoff of the air war. We're sort of tired and we're exhausted, and we're beginning to realize that this is what happens in war. Be flexible, be teachable, don't question it, just do. I can say that was the longest day of my life and one of the most exciting in my 71 years. Now we're starting to operate our daily routines. Our brigade was still setting up their helicopters, hair fires, and getting the 30-millimeter rounds of ammunition. They were not fully operational until the end of January, 15 days after the war started. We did have an early morning greeting from Saddam. We were sitting asleep, and I was picked to be one of the E-7s. There were 3 of us at that time, and I didn't realize at the time, but E-7 was a fairly high rank out in the combat zone, and so we had some privileges. They put us in a room, and we were zonked out. But at 1 a.m., all hell breaks loose. No warning, just a loud explosion as an Al-Hussein Scud missile lands within a half mile of our location. The missile impacts the ground at Mach 5. I just knew I was blown off of my cot and on the ground. My ears were ringing. I didn't quite understand how or why, but one of the infantry dudes I was sleeping beside immediately knew what happened and basically said, "We've got shell shock. There could be gas." So he said, "Get mask up." We had to put on our masks the first thing, get on our mop suits, and be ready and stay inside for further orders. One of the infantrymen was so bad he had to take a pee so bad and hurting so bad that he said, "I am not going to put a mask on or a mop suit until I can pee." And so he's saying this, and we're laughing with our gas mask, and he's running over to the toilet, and he's sitting there doing his business, and it's taking forever, and he's laughing, and we're laughing, and we at least had a moment of humor while we're all trying to get on our gas mask and gas gear to figure out what had hit and what was going on. Praise the Lord, it was just a half mile away, no damage, no gas, but a very close call on a large crater near our camp. At about this time, 7th Corps also issued PB tablets, pyrogestamine bromide tablets that they wanted us to take to prepare our bodies for just in case we had a gas attack. Praise God, our brigade doctor was right on top of that stuff, and he started reading about the side effects of these PB tablets and basically realized it was pretty much an unknown medication. Under his advice to Colonel Hitt, he said, "Please do not let our troops take these tablets unless it's absolutely necessary." Colonel Hitt listened to the doctor, and he saved our units from terrible side effects that are now documented as Gulf War syndrome with a close tie to these medications. We dodged another big bullet right there. This was part of our daily life in Desert Storm. We had just a very small taste of what Israelis must face and experience every day with missile attacks coming in from Iran proxies. So many problems moving the ground force into a combat zone with another person launching missiles at you all the time. This was just some of the logistical nightmares moving 500,000 troops, support, tents, weapons, and everything to get us set up in support of Operation Desert Storm. Many of the places that troops came into we heard horror stories of were abandoned, rat-infested buildings. Marines arrived into those. They had to move out. People went into hotels, and then the hotels were targeted. There were all kinds of issues. We had so many military aircraft deployed and loaded, we couldn't even find places for the planes to land with the load that they had. And then we had so many military aircraft out for maintenance that they had to have so many missions done that they literally were making missions for airplanes that hadn't even been repaired. We had to have civilian aircraft to haul 64% of our cargo and 27% of our passengers just to get that force over to Saudi Arabia. Everything the military had was gone operational. When Saddam went into Kuwait, what force was available in theater that would stop and take on the fourth largest military to keep him from going into Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE? He was ready to go, and he had 8 years of experience against Iran. Plus, they were pretty battle-tested in gas and techniques like that. Nothing was there to stop him from grabbing 40% of the world's oil. That's why we pushed so hard and so fast in August to get some assets in theater to slow him down just in case he decided he wanted to push forward and take over the entire world's oil source. Our little weather unit had weather requests from over 14 different units that needed support. Not only our main support for 11th Aviation Brigade, 2 squadrons of Apaches, intel units, all units that needed downwind projections, WMD, gas attack forecast. We were busy. Long days. I know I was running from about 5 a.m. to midnight. That was standard for me. I don't know how people survived World War I and World War II with such long days. I lost 35 pounds in 4.5 months, and it was a pretty minor, easygoing war. Had this stayed on for a year or more, I'd have probably dropped to 130 pounds, and I'm 6'2". I was eating 2 MREs a day and along with chow food, but you weren't eating because you were hungry. You were eating because you were busy. You just needed something to keep going so you could keep moving. When the air campaign started, 7th Corps didn't have their units ready to fly, so they were basically grounded. Air Force was ruling the sky. We could look up and see B-52s flying overhead with F-15s and F-16s as escorts on their wingtips. Then within 20 minutes, you'd feel the ground shake as ordnance was dropped on the front lines. Remember T-Rex in Jurassic Park? You could see the thump of his feet and the ripples in the coffee cups. Same thing happened for us. 500 and 750-pound bombs from the border, it would see the cups shake and the ground shake, and when they dropped those 2,000-pounders, it definitely shook. We also dropped 11 Daisy Cutter bombs that were made for Vietnam. This is a 15,000-pound bomb that would make an airfield out of a dense jungle so helicopters could land. Why were we using them? They were left over. And we wanted to drop them near the front lines to see if it would take out their minefields and demoralize the enemy. Made a huge mushroom cloud. Shook the whole area with a large bang. They had to put out reports to tell us it's coming, and then you would wait for the time for it to detonate. Reports from inside Iraq said they thought they were getting tactically nuked. Many Iraqis, seeing this occur, started surrendering every single day. Even the 2,000-pound bombs produced a beautiful little mushroom effect and a half-mile kill zone in the desert. Not only did we provide general weather for operations and flying conditions, but our main purpose was to supply Apaches with EO weather, electro-optical weather for Hellfire missiles. Our goal was to give them thermal contrast and infrared crossover times to ensure their lasers could designate their targets in adverse weather situations. Let's put it in an easy way. We had to keep them from targeting their lasers through battle damage and prevailing winds of blowing over the top of their stuff that would cause the lasers to be cluttered. We needed them to stay clear and focused so the target would stay in phase so the weapons would hit the target. That was what was crucial, having them understand the prevailing wind directions so they could target downwind to upwind. Our first taste of what the Apaches could do came on February 16th at 0100 hours. This was called Operation Red Storm. We were assigned to feint an attack up the Wadi al-Batan, an old river basin, to make Saddam think that that's where the attack was coming from, instead of the massive sweep around for the western flank that was Schwarzkopf's 7th Corps plan. He was working with General Franks to make sure that was what was going to happen, but we needed deception to make Saddam stay in place. So we used Apaches, heavy artillery barrages, Air Force strikes to make the Iraqis stay hunkered down, put their heads in the ground, thinking this is the border where we're going to attack. We briefed our air crews, stressed that their main objective was to see what direction the wind was blowing from so they could attack downwind targets first to avoid smoke and battle debris from messing up their targeting lasers. When the crews came back from their mission, it was quite successful, and we requested to see the gun cameras to see how this weather played in their targeting. The pilots reported we looked for the wind direction and immediately noticed a prevailing wind from debris that happened to be blowing on the ground. Then notified their entire squadron and proceeded to attack the group from right to left to avoid battle damage clutter from clouding our targets. Weather was received, it was an outstanding success. Not only did they eliminate key frontline targets, but the attack with Air Force, artillery, and Apaches kept the Iraqi 10th Armored Division hunkered down and fixed in place so 7th Corps could do their flanking maneuver, not having to worry about their 10th Armored. Unfortunately, 2 soldiers from the 1st Armored Division went a little too forward and were targeted in this target attack due to misidentification and coordination challenges. We've learned some lessons in Desert Storm, and now we're putting beacons on our friendlies so that people can see an infrared beacon and know not to shoot our own guys. Lessons we're learning. Right after that attack, we had to relocate further west on 18th February to a new location called Log Base Echo. It takes a couple of days to get set back up again, work out the antennas, and get data flowing again. This location was just in the sand. No reference points, no buildings, no showers, no landmarks, tents and sand. After the deep attack, we moved to make it harder for Saddam to track where the Apaches were launching from and be able to sort of dodge any scuds he might come in. And we also wanted to be prepared for the left flank maneuver that was being planned for 7th Corps. The desert has no landmarks, has no frames, has no reference, no hills or mountains, no trees. We had something called Tap Line Road, that one road that ran from west to east along the Iraqi border. And the Saudis would drive up and down the road to be in the desert sometimes. They drove brand new Mercedes, beautiful, beautiful cars. And if they broke down, they'd call a helicopter to come pick them up because they didn't care about the car, and they'd get their family in the helicopter, send somebody out to take the car or not. Cars were left out in the desert. Iraqis would steal them from Kuwait and take them out to the desert as well. So we had Mercedes sitting out in the middle by Tap Line Road. So what we would do was say, turn right at the white Mercedes, turn left at the black Mercedes, and so on down the line. Mercedes and abandoned trucks in the desert were the only fixed landmarks that we had. Unfortunately, it was about this time that Saddam was thinking, maybe he's not in a very good tactical situation after all, and he moved to a scorched earth policy by lighting up Kuwaiti oil wells and everything else in his path. He had pissed off a lot of countries and neighbors, and he now realized he might be on the wrong end of things. He started thinking this on January 22nd as oil wells and the Wafra oil field in southern Kuwait started exploding, And by February 22nd, near the start of the impending ground war, and President Bush ordering ultimatums to get out of Kuwait by February 23rd, Saddam lit up the oil wells with over 200 burning by February 23rd. By the end of the 100-hour ground war, Saddam had scorched 650 oil wells, besides igniting trenches of oil to slow down anything that was attacking him. Over 6 million barrels of oil a day were now lit and burning. Along with winds and rain and sand, it created an atmospheric nightmare for coalition forces targeting their escape routes. From our weather point of view, it was extremely difficult. We had to now forecast a black airborne oil slick cloud that would be from 50 feet off the ground to 15,000 feet, 350 miles wide to 900 miles long, and any aircraft or helicopter that went into it was blind, basically sludged oil. You couldn't see a thing, you couldn't target a thing, and now you had to wipe off your aircraft to go from there. The good Lord kept prevailing winds headed in the face of our enemies, which if he had had weapons of mass destruction, would have destroyed himself. But at the same time, that oil-slick cloud prevented helicopters from engaging many escaping vehicles from Kuwait, making the ground war more difficult for them to succeed. Now weather was even more important. February 24th, the ground war kicked off. Objective Rochambeau was the first major territorial objective assigned to the French division Daggett during the ground offensive of the 1991 Gulf War. Named after the coalition planners after the famous French general for the American Revolutionary War, this objective was a critical step in securing the far left flank for the U.S. 18th Airborne and 7th Corps. This was a point that was just 30 miles into enemy territory. The French had AMX 30B2 tanks, which were light and fast, could move along very quick with the French Foreign Legion units and Gazelle anti-tank helicopters, force of about 12,500 men. Joining them was 82nd Airborne's 2nd Brigade Task Force, had about 4,500 men. This was now 3 parachute infantry battalions carrying Dragon and AT-4 anti-tank missiles. Pretty formidable force on ground, plus they hooked up with TOW anti-tank missile systems on Humvees, and they towed 105mm howitzers to provide immediate responsive organic artillery strike wherever the French needed it. Plus, most important, the 27th Engineer Battalion that was part of the 82nd Airborne that had equipment to breach berms, minefields, dug-in defense systems, and take care of UXOs. UXOs are unexploded ordnance. The engineers had to plow a road from the Tapline Road, called MRS Texas, a 2-lane sand highway, clear it of mines deep into Iraq to keep our troops and fuel resupplied at a moment's notice. We're moving a total of 17,000 troops north. Even with over a month of Air Force bombing on the western flank hitting targets, the French and 82nd Airborne ran into the Iraqi 45th Infantry Division that was dug in and holding their defensive positions. As they moved north, intense firefights broke out along the way. Within 24 hours, they reached Objective Rochambeau, taking in an estimated 2,500 to 3,000 Iraqi prisoners. This was unexpected and unplanned. Now they have a logistical problem what to do with the Iraqis. They paused briefly to regroup and gather their units, keep some of their team back to hold the prisoners, then press forward again to Objective Chambord, a crossroad border section that was basically a crossroad section in Iraq to stop anybody who might be filtering in from the north. By the 50th hour, they had reached As-Salaman Air Base and had secured the area. No soldiers from the French 82nd or 82nd Airborne were killed in action in this sweeping push going forward north into Iraq. They had moved over 90 miles into enemy territory without one loss of life and are now the most north units in Operation Desert Storm. Unfortunately, 10 soldiers died securing As-Salaman Air Base from unexploded ordnance. All of the unexploded ordnance were from Air Force munitions dropped on As-Salaman Air Base in the past 5 weeks. A single CBU-87 carries 202 bomblets that can spread over several football fields. with one bomblet every 9 feet. These are highly effective fragmentation bombs with over 300 preformed steel fragments, anti-armor shaped charges penetrating 7 inches of conventional armor plating, and shooting off incendiary rings. Aircraft carried these weapons. Over 10,000 plus of these canisters were dropped in Desert Storm. With such a high failure rate of duds, about 1 to 2 million bomblets were now left active in Iraq and Kuwait on top of the ground. UXOs were responsible for killing over 24 servicemen in Desert Storm. Why am I focused on this? We were getting ready to move into Solomon Airfield later on. The ground war had some of the worst weather you could forecast from February 24th until the 28th. 100-foot ceilings, 400 meters visibility, winds out of the southeast gusting at 33 miles per hour, thunderstorms, rain, blowing sand. It was the way everything was until the front came through on February 27th. And then the blowing sand just came from a different direction. During this time, we had to brief our brigade, Colonel Hitt commander, that if he attacked from behind the weather front, approaching his target objectives, he would be much more successful. That's what 4th of the 229th did. They waited for the weather to change, followed in the weather front, and during 2 separate 30-minute attacks, the 18 AH-64 Apache helicopters decimated elements of the retreating Iraqi 10th Armored Division that had before been hunkered down. They destroyed 33 battle tanks, 22 armored personnel carriers, 37 other vehicles, 1 bunker, and an undetermined number of Iraqi soldiers. Their precision strike helped create confusion and disarray on the highway headed back into Iraq, creating a kill box for all of the coalition forces. It was nicknamed the Highway of Death, where 1,800 to 2,700 vehicles that were destroyed or abandoned fleeing Kuwait and trying to get back to Baghdad. When the war was over, I happened to be on King Khalid Air Base and saw Air Force combat camera crews. I asked if I could walk in and see what they were doing, and they showed me pictures of that carnage. Glad it was just pictures and not in person. Absolutely horrific. Some of the greatest armored tank battles occurred in Operation Desert Storm. The Battle of 73 Easting on February 26, the 2nd Armored Cav took on the Republican Guards of the Tawakkul Division. The Tawakkul stood for, "We have placed our trust or put our trust in Allah." In a blinding sandstorm with near zero visibility, U.S. M1 Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles caught the dug-in Iraqi armor unit by surprise. Using our thermal imagery, they destroyed 28 tanks, 16 armored personnel carriers in under 23 minutes. No Americans were killed. On February 27th, in all that blinding rain and sand, the largest tank battle of the war had a massive head-on collision with heavy armored divisions. 1st Armored faced the Medina Danube Division of the IRGC. Iraq again had dug their tanks in, even though these were now T-72s against the M1 Abrams. But the Abrams outranged the T-72s by a wide margin. 186 Iraqi tanks, 127 armored vehicles destroyed in under 2 hours, crushing the IRGC. Just 2 Americans lost their lives in such a fierce battle. 4 Abrams, 2 Bradleys, 2 Apaches, and 1 A-10 were lost. Since the Iraqis were dug in positions, they had intensive anti-aircraft fire, which brought down our aircraft. The 100-hour war was brilliant in certain aspects. Total air dominance, the start of precision-guided munitions, stealth aircraft, coordinated large coalition forces working together, space-based assets for communication, all in 1991. We dropped dumb bombs from 35,000 feet from B-52s on the front-line Iraqi troops. A decade later, coming back from Iraq, all those munitions would be smart, GPS-guided bombs. We went from 100 meters accuracy to 15 meters accuracy. That's a world of difference. Lessons learned: one precision-guided aircraft with the right munitions can replace 100 dumb bombs. Strategic bombing can have a quick and paralyzing effect to a country. Information is crucial. Communications are key. Moving fast on a battlefield is critical to let everyone know, so friendly fire is a thing of the past. Beacons need to be issued so each unit is flashing its location and IR so we don't shoot the good guys. It's great to have our multi-branches of the military all on the same page, all talking as one cohesive unit. We can improve on that. High-tech armies on the move require just as much high-tech logistics to keep them supplied, even more so than what's happening on the front line. We need to control the media like we did. Don't let the media control the military operations. Keep the media contained until it's safe for our troops. And we also need to find better exit strategies. We still haven't figured that one out. With the ground war over, our ops tempo was much more subdued. We're now flying cover and ensuring leftover Iraqi troops behave themselves. We had thousands of prisoners that needed to be guarded and the logistics of what to do with them. It is estimated 65,000 to 80,000 prisoners were sent walking towards Saudi Arabia to two massive camps. By March of 1991, we were already repatriating the Iraqis back home. 15,000 Iraqis didn't want to go home, so they needed further help to go to other countries, fearing what Saddam would do to them. They needed some protection. We were now the overseeing force in theater, as the units that deployed first were starting to head home, and we were the mop-up crew. We jumped from Log Base Echo into As Salaman Air Base on March 23rd. The way was open on MSR Texas, but the sandy road now had deep ruts from many vehicles and UXOs left over on the sides of the road unexploded. It was a gauntlet to go forward, dodging leftover equipment, UXOs, deep ruts, damaged vehicles. We had problems trying to get north, and all the while we're sitting on wet sandbags just in case we happen to run over something that goes boom. A wet sandbag had a lot more stopping force than a dry sandbag. We did not arrive until night and had to immediately set up our weather station. We're in Iraq, and we needed to stay aware and keep a barrier for our troops. What we didn't know was the airfield still had 13,000 pounds of unexploded ordnance on the surface that needed to be taken care of. We also weren't aware that 10 people had already lost their lives moving that ordnance out. We got weather up and running by 2 a.m. We went to get a nap, and by morning we're bugging out because EOD found 2,000-pound bomb unexploded by the tower. They told us to move out as quietly as we can. Let's not disturb all the bomblets on the ground left everywhere. So we moved away about 3 clicks out and watched them detonate a 2,000-pounder and other ordnance. Now let me tell you, even 3 clicks out, a 2,000-pound bomb can shake you up and pucker your insides. Nice mushroom cloud, too. Got a picture of that one. We teamed up with the French Daggett unit, patrolled the entire front as 18th Corps started to move back to the States. We ran cover for prisoners, kept Kurdish Turks from crossing the borders. We provided humanitarian aid to the Iraqis in the town of As Salaman and other things. That is something so amazing about America. We quickly think of the conquered nation's people, the people that had nothing to do with the war. We brought down trucks of medical, food, water, you name it, to help the Iraqis start to recover from all the damage war brings and all the destruction from a dictator. We couldn't talk Iraqi, but Susie, our weather airman, found a way to draw pictures and communicate with the children. It worked. Here we are helping Iraqis rebuild and survive. Did you know at night, with no lights anywhere, the Iraqi and Saudi deserts are so bright from starlight that you can see and find your way around just from starlight? No moon. Just starlight. It's amazing. By the way, mail from home is such a blessing. My Cherie was a warrior for sending peanut M&Ms to me all the time. She sent the Word of God, newspapers, kid notes, but just a touch from home. Sometimes socks and underwear because they were wearing out. It seemed like boxes arrived every 10 days. It brings such joy to your heart to see mail, and also sharing M&Ms makes you like a superhero in Desert Storm. She rocked it. Notes from the kids, clothing, etc. Awesomeness. I realize mail call means the world to your loved one that's deployed, especially in a foreign country and at war. Whatever 7th Corps needed, we were now the flying unit to help out. Weather did improve. It got very hot. Hard to sleep in a tent at 100 degrees, but you do your best. You'd have to sleep with a bandana over your mouth and nose to keep the sand out, but your ears would fill up with dirt and sand. You had to shake each one out the side of your head if you were a back sleeper before rolling out of bed. I'm a side sleeper, so that hadn't worked too well. When we moved forward, it took a while to get water. We had a stretch of 14 days with no potable water. That's the water you wash with, to try to get unfilthy with. So no water for 14 days. We were pretty ripe. We also had to take turns burning our waste, stirring the fecal drums, carrying 5-gallon water once it came in across our post to our location because you couldn't drive because it would stir up the sand. No wonder you lose so much weight in 4.5 months. During our support with the French, General Hanvier of the French 6th Light Armor Division, commanding about 12,500 troops, was handing control over to Colonel Hitt of the 11th Aviation Brigade. Some of us were handpicked and told to be inspected by the French general in a military handoff at As-Salaman Air Base from French-occupied forces to the American Army unit. It was just a handshake. It was nothing formal, just a walkthrough, but very symbolic of our cooperation unity in time of war. His French unit started leaving by March 24th and were out by the end of March. Unfortunately, during this time, our pilots wanted to see which the French ate in their military rations compared to MREs. The French had quite a bit of a setup, but they also had bad mayonnaise. Our pilots were laid up for over 2 days with diarrhea from that one, sort of keeping our Apaches grounded until all the pilots who were incapacitated could get back to their crew and do something like flying around and protecting us. Another note, which I just discovered recently, was my grandfather was in World War I in Chemin des Dames in France in April of 1918. He received the Croix de Guerre, the Cross of War, equivalent to a Silver Star with Valor from a 4-star French general for bravery during World War I because of hand-to-hand combat in the trenches. Here in As-Salaman, Iraq, 1991, 73 years later, his grandson is inspected by a French general in Desert Storm. We did get our first day off in Iraq a little bit time after that. After 4 months and 2 weeks, we finally got a day off. I didn't know what to do, but it was nice just to rest. We did have a fun flyover one time. Air Force wanted to open up their afterburners and they wanted to buzz our unit. I didn't know if that was just the Air Force showing off their muscle compared to a helicopter unit, but they wanted to buzz us up here in Iraq, and Colonel Hitt let us know about it and when to expect the Air Force. Our observers were out watching the horizon, and we saw the swirl of wingtip smoke and sand coming in. We all jumped up on our truck to give them a big wave, and sure enough, an F-16 came down by about treetop level. There's no trees. Lifted us right off our feet and onto our butts. Nothing like it. The Air Force giving us a show. In 1987, I did get the opportunity to fly an F-15 for about an hour and a half out of Luke Air Force Base. Of course, with a pilot. Nothing like breaking the sound barrier, having all your body fluids simultaneously ooze out of you without your control, taking on some G-forces. That's the Air Force. I did throw up, but who cares? It's a wonderful, once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thank God for our pilots. Before leaving Iraq, we had a lot of ammo we needed to thin down before coming back into Saudi Arabia. Matter of fact, Saudi Arabia requested that we not have any ammunition coming back in from Iraq. Our commander said, no way. Keep your basic load. But we did have quite a bit excess of ammo for war. So we got to shoot up all the captured Iraqi trucks and vehicles that our Apaches had captured. We drug them in with the bulldozer and took a 50 caliber machine gun and shot up the trucks and the armored, had M60s let it rip, shot an AT-4 and blew up a truck. I had a blast, literally. Felt a little bit like Rambo certified after that. We got our vehicles all cleaned up and headed to Saudi by the 15th of April, headed back to King Khalid Air Base for cleaning them up. Getting the sand and Iraqi dirt was tough. We had to power wash them, get all that off. Then after that exercise, we went to go to Khobar Towers to rest up for our redeployment to Germany. Yes, the same Khobar Towers that in June of 1996, 5 years later, would be blown up with 20,000 pounds of explosive, killing 19 Americans. We slept one night on the flight line. That plane broke down, never made it. Then they sent another. Finally headed to ill assignment, our families, on the 30th of April. Hallelujah. We had to wash our clothes by hand when we were in the Desert Storm and on scrub boards with water. I think I only had about 2 pair of underwear left and maybe 3 socks. Sand and water don't mix. They just shred your clothing. Not sure what would have happened had we stayed any longer. My T-shirts were about 2 yards wide. They had just thinned out. You just run out of clothes because they wear out as you're trying to keep them clean. No one talks about that. When we got back to Ellisheim, basically we had to throw out everything. When we went to war with a 5-man team instead of our normal 8-man team, 7th Corps took 3 of our forecasters with them to their headquarters. We had 2 forecasters, 2 observers, and 1 officer for working 24/7 with 11th Aviation Brigade. You get the picture. Weather affected our operations over 39% of the time. I remember one time we saw this massive sandstorm coming from miles out when we were in Iraq at As Salaman, and I thought we could beat the storm. I ran out to get a quick 2-gallon shower. The satellite was so small we made huge mistakes in timing the weather. Anyhow, you run out to get a couple of gallons of cold water in a woodshed and try to get clean. I was with Warrant Officer Chris Martin. He was on one side of the shower. I was on the other, and we knew we had to hurry. And I was moving quick. He said, if the weatherman thinks he can make it, we can make it. We're good to go. So sorry, Chris. That windstorm hit us with such force as we're standing there in a shed, naked with water on us, and now it's just mud and dirt piling up on us. It was absolutely miserable. It was covering our face, our legs, our teeth, it just everywhere. We're mad and we're laughing at the same time. Chris was saying a few choice words, but at the same time, you couldn't help but laugh. You're now just miserable. You're just a muddy mess. So here we are trying to get clothes back on when we're just a solid wall of mud. Unfortunately, our friend, Mr. Martin, went flying that night after the dust storm. He couldn't see any reference points or find the horizon, and he was with an aerial observer, Sergeant Rusty Awalt. They crashed into the ground, unfortunately killing them instantly. 2 souls we lost from 11th Aviation Brigade. We did a field funeral out there, all due to the difficult flying conditions in the desert. There are other moments when you're standing beside a Patriot missile battery when it launches 2 missiles to intercept a Scud that's over the top of you. Nothing like a sonic boom to get your attention, watching a Scud get knocked out in the sky over the top of your head and praying that the Scud doesn't land on top of you. Other times you're talking to buildings or trees because it's so dark. You can't find out where you are or what direction you're headed in as you slide down into a ditch of concertina wire. The joys of camping with the Army. I can go on. I've lived over 2 years in a tent or on a cot in my 23 years. I never did get to go camping with the Air Force. I got to see what the Air Force was like at King Khalid Air Base. Couldn't believe it. They have air-conditioned tents and floors in their tents, and they're sealed up like a balloon. They have ice cream machines. They have flush toilets. It's nothing like going with the Army. But then the Army is glam camping compared to the Marines. So you count your blessings. It's all from your perspective. On a side note, we had the best weather cadre team I've ever had the privilege of getting to know and going to war with. Shout out to all my Det 13th 7th Weather Squadron founders and our team from 1988 to 1991. God bless one and all, combat warriors for life. I think part 2 of this needs to be looking at Iran currently in 2026. It looks like the same thing, just a different country. We should do some comparisons for now and see where it leads us. This would be an interesting talk. Until the next time, blessings. Thanks for listening to the Squall Line Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Fiske. Until next time.